Hey, everybody, and welcome to Comics and Cinema. I'm your host, Alex Klein, and today we have very special guest Kevin with us. Kevin, welcome.
Thanks for having. Oh God, geez. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, no problem. Always a pleasure having you on. Today we are talking about Miss Marvel, specifically the Miss Marvel comics. This is our comic book episode for the month. Though I'm starting to think as time goes on, it's going to probably be more frequently than monthly, as a lot of these stories start dropping around the same time. But nevertheless, Miss Marvel comes out on Disney Plus tonight, apparently, and so we'll start there. Kevin, when tonight?
Oh man, it could be any minute now. So viewers, if you're watching us and we see it drop, we may cut this short so we can go watch. No, I think they've been very vague. So I feel it will be midnight Eastern, 9 Pacific, if anything. Shout out to our friend and producer Brian for pretty much saying that he's called out Disney's data gathering initiative with this and Obi-Wan also dropping for the next couple of weeks to see where the users are going to be putting their minutes first on when they log into the app. Are they going to Miss Marvel first, or are they going to go to Obi-Wan first? So
Is the
um,
assumption then that Obi-Wan is also going to drop tonight?
I don't think so. I think Obi-Wan is gonna still go at 3 a.m. Partially, yeah. I wonder if they do, because it is the premiere episode, if they wanna maybe space it out from Obi-Wan to help the servers a little bit or something. But I mean, you're still going to have that for the next 3 weeks with Obi-Wan for episode 4 tomorrow, 5 next week, and the finale. Definitely for the finale in 2 weeks. When it's over Miss Marvel's midway point. So it's like either way. I know people will still probably be up for 3 a.m. Eastern time or whatever that time is for where you're at. So it'll definitely be interesting. And I think what we were talking about off air with Brian uh, was he had pretty much hit it on the head. Like, this is like a big data collection for Disney and Disney Plus right now to see where their viewers are going and the minutes are being watched.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and hopefully I would love it. I'm a big data guy as well. I hope they release that sort of stuff. They're probably not going to, but I hope they do something to where they can actually compare it, because I feel like a lot of times it's not that they're fudging the numbers, but they don't give you the entire story. So they're like, oh, this was the greatest thing that ever happened this week.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, but you were basing it off of X, Y, and Z. And so for this, oh, Miss Marvel was the top episode, but it's like, but you released it last night versus Obi-Wan coming out during the day. Like,
Right.
to truly understand it, they would need to release them both at the same time and really look at the data to see who watched what first. And even then, like, to see if it crashes the system, right? To have
Hmm.
There was probably gonna be a ton watching Obi-Wan, a ton watching Miss Marvel, and they need to make sure that their system can handle that. So hopefully, we'll see. It'll be an interesting test. I'm super excited though, and if it is 10 o'clock tonight, I may actually tune in and watch it. Otherwise, I will probably catch it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, midnight. I did stay up for Obi-Wan when midnight, and that was 2 episodes. So I pushed through that. So I don't know if I'll make it to midnight for this one, but if not, yeah, I'll definitely catch both in the morning. And at that point, then it's going to be which one do I watch first? Because if I could stay up and Miss Marvel drops sooner, it's like, of course I'll watch Miss Marvel, and then Obi-Wan will come after that. But if I have both of them at my disposal in the morning, also, like, which one is I'm going to be in that first title card on the Disney Plus app? Like, is it going to be Miss Marvel, or is it going to be Obi-Wan? Like, that's I feel like it might be Miss Marvel to try and get anybody who may not be familiar with her, which obviously we're here to help you with a little bit tonight, to try and get eyes onto that, because Obi-Wan is definitely going to get the eyes and the draw. So yeah, that'll be curious to know what, at least for this week, and then also moving forward, like, which one will get the first title card for new release.
Yeah, I'll be excited to see how I deal with it too, because I like both of those shows. I'm assuming I have a feeling I might like Miss Marvel more than Obi-Wan. We'll see, but I want to give them both a fair shake. So who knows? Maybe one week I'll watch Obi-Wan first, and then the next week I'll watch Miss Marvel first when
Hmm.
they come out, just to kind of even the odds on that data. But
Yeah.
before we dive into these Miss Marvel comments, I did want to share I got a shipment this week from Certified Guarantee Corp, the CGC to a lot of you out there. They slab comics, and they do this thing called the Signature Series, where you can send in comics to be signed by specific people that they have come in to do these signings. And so you pay a flat fee to get it signed, but then to also get it graded and slabbed in the plastic. And so this one was from, and this had to have been in like January or February. It was Brian Michael Bendis. And I freaked out because there's specific comics that I had where I was like, I know, like one day he's going to have to, he's going to do a signing. And I was bummed because there was a few that I didn't have anymore. I didn't have a copy of Secret Invasion. I didn't have a copy of Age of Ultron, and I wanted to do both of those. But again, I would have just absolutely broken my bank. But I did send in 5. And so I wanted to share these both grades and numbers. So this first one is, we'll see, let me get that nice. This is New Avengers 23. This is a sketch variant. So the cover doesn't typically look like this, but I saw this in a shop and it was like $5. And I was like, I love this design, like the black with the red. It turns out this is actually a pretty rare comic. And then getting it sent in for a 9.6 is awesome because I've literally been sitting on this comic since it came out. And so I was kind of nervous that it wasn't going to get a good grade. But I started with that one first because that's like the least exciting, if you could say that. And we'll move on to probably the most exciting of the bunch, which is, I said I couldn't share it when we were doing our Illuminati episode. But here it is, the New Avengers Illuminati. I bought this one from Midtown Comics. This was actually the first signed comic I ever bought. And it was priced as is. So it was, what is this? $3.99 back when a one shot was. And so it was $3.99 with a signature from Alex Maleev. And so then when I sent it in and got it graded, because I was like, I need to keep it. And so they gave me the green label because they didn't witness Maleev's signature. But now we got the Bendis signature. So it's got that cool yellow with green. And again, hey, 9.6. That's fantastic. This next one I'm super pumped about. This is Avengers versus X-Men issue number 4. This is like a 1 in 70 variant or something like that.
Okay.
So another one that I got on eBay for like $15 or something like that. Awesome deal. I sent it in last year to be signed by John Romano Jr. and Scott Hanna. They did a co-signing for it, and it came back at it was either a 9.4. Actually, it says it on this one, weirdly enough. It was a 9.6. And I didn't get it pressed. And so there's like an extra charge. You can get it pressed to stamp out any possible issues. And so I was like, I'll do that on this next one. So Bendis signed it, pressed it. We got the 9.8. So
there you go.
This was a big one. Huge score. Here comes another one too. This I had slabbed, and it came in at a 9.2 on the slabbing, which was a bummer because, again, this was a 1 in, I think, 200 variant that I got on eBay for $10, and I've never seen it cheap again. So I was like, 9.2, come on. Got it pressed. Came out at a 9.6.
Yeah.
It is, yes, it's Siege issue number 2. We got the Bendis signature. Look at Sentry. He is absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, so that made my day because I'm fine with some lower grades. Like I'm okay with a 9.42, but like 9.2, come on. So, hey, that to me is message that get your comics pressed if you send them in, because you never know, you might get it. This last one is really important to me as well. It's Invincible Iron Man number 1. I went to a con, Denver Comic Con, back in 2018, I think. Maybe it was even 2016. And it was funny because Justin Ponsor was at the con, and he passed away the next year from, I think he had brain cancer. And it was super, super sad, but I was so grateful that I got him to sign. I mean, he didn't even charge me for it. He was like, sure, I'll sign that. And then when I got home, I was looking him up, and I have so many comics that he's done. He's the colorist on them. And so to be able to send that in and have Bendis signed it as well, I think is super, super happy about that. Super proud. But yeah, like I said, I don't get those shipments in often, but when I do, I hope that they're as good as that one was. So thanks for humoring me, Kevin.
Of course. Yeah, that's great to see, and I'm glad you got some great graded comics out of that.
Yeah, thank you. So let's dive in to Miss Marvel. So this is, for those of you wanting to follow along or wanting to read this on your own leisure, this is the first series, which came out in 2014 by G. Willow Wilson and Adrian Alfona. I'll say this right now. I'm not a big fan of Alfona's art. And I noticed that pretty quickly when I was reading towards the end of this run when Takeshi Miyazawa was on it. And I love Takechi because she, I think it's a she did The Runaways with Brian K. Vaughan. And then she also did Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane back when that came out. And I loved both of those. And so she had a couple of issues and I was like, no way, they're the one, they're doing this. But then in the next issue was back to Adrian, and, you know, Kamala's hair was like huge and all. I don't know, just not a fan of the way that the Alfona art was, but it certainly doesn't take away from it. Overall, though, this first series, so it spans 19 issues. It covers obviously the origin of her powers, how she gets them. It's technically not her first appearance. Her first appearance was in Marvel Now .1. She had a short little. Actually, technically, her first
Captain
appearance
Marvel,
was
right?
Captain Marvel 17. Yeah, but her first Miss Marvel appearance was in that .1. Both of those issues are very rare. I did have the Captain Marvel issue, but sold it a long time ago, so you know how that goes. But yeah, so we're going to start by kind of. I wanted to get what were your overall thoughts on at least this first run of the series, these 19 issues.
I really liked it. This was my introduction to the character. I obviously have been aware of the character and like know everything about it. Obviously, we have the Marvel Studios Disney Plus series coming out, so like you know I've been aware of it, but I never actually had read any of her comics or if I had any of the ones that I never read her solo series, you know. So this
Okay.
was I really enjoyed reading it and yeah, getting to understand who the character is more and like her dynamic and demeanor and everything like that. So it was a lot of fun, and especially because I'm pretty sure a vast majority of the series will at least be drawing influence from it. Even obviously not direct one-to-one, but you know they're going to pull the spirit out of most likely this run. You know, so getting to see the locations and like getting to understand Jersey City and who Kamala is, her relationship to her parents, her friends, her faith, all that stuff was really enjoyable to read and made me excited for the series and to potentially check out other comic series that she's been a part of.
Yeah, her second run that I think it goes for 38 issues is also really good. That's where Dagger comes in, is in that second run. He's not in this one, even though he is in the show. But yeah, and I felt the same way. I'm trying to remember how I'd first heard. I guess I first heard of her in that Captain Marvel comic, and it wasn't. Again, it was very. You barely see her. I think she's in two little snippets where she's looking up at Captain Marvel as she flies away after she saved some people. And so I wasn't expecting much, but it was during that time when it was like I got to get the first issues of things, and so I had gotten the first issue of Miss Marvel and read it and immediately was hooked. I was like, wow. And I've said this before. She feels like the modern day Peter Parker just because she has that same sort of, I don't want to tell my parents about my powers. I have to balance high school. So you can almost say, too, she's kind of like Miles Morales in a sense, too. But it just was interesting because we had focused on kind of Peter and maybe you could say Miles as well for such a long time. It was really refreshing to see her kind of go through, especially with the focus on religion and with her family pressures that were coming. Because you never really saw that with Peter. Certainly, you see a little bit with Miles, but both of them don't really deal with religion that much. And so I really liked that a lot, and they really embraced that. It was cool. I mean, the whole backstory too was awesome of Sana Amanat kind of coming up with this character, and I think she says, you know, wasn't trying to create like me as a superhero, but I just wanted to see myself in a comic, which is I love the way that she says that, where she's, you know, she's not afraid to admit that, which is awesome. Like and that's what a lot of people in this world want, right? They want that representation in comics, and so good for her for speaking up. I think there's a great special on Disney Plus. Was it the 616?
Yeah, Marvel 616.
Marvel, yeah. There's a women's episode, and so she's highlighted in it, and a couple of other people as well. I can't remember who. I think Bree Ward and
Kelly Sue DeConnick, I think.
Yep. And so they're all kind of talking about the influence of Kamala, and also with Captain Marvel kind of influence. Like that right there was such a golden era, I think, or even just a golden moment in comics, because I feel like you'd just gotten off the heels of Carol being redesigned and refined and coming into her own power. And that, again, that came out in, what was it? It was the 17th issue of that run. So it was like fresh. That would have been like a year and a half after, because that Captain Marvel comic came out in 2012. So 2 years. But
yeah,
to see a brand new character who's inspired by a current character who just got this brand new amazing costume. Like, and you get to this point where you're almost smiling because you're like, to me, this is what legacy looks like in comics. And I think maybe there's a conversation to be had there too about how it was around this time that a lot of legacy characters were kind of being created. You had Kate Bishop, Miles Morales. I mean, everyone on the Young Avengers, right?
Yeah.
And then they really marketed that. That was like 3 or 4 years ago when they came out with those Generations issues, where it was like the two Hawkeyes are teaming up, the two Thors are teaming up. So it was like the new character and the old character. And this to me was one of the first times they did it successfully. I think again, you just felt like I fell in love with Captain Marvel's costume. And then seeing Miss Marvel, it was like, oh yeah, that's Captain Marvel's old name, and it doesn't look exactly like her costume, but she's inspired by her, and like all of it added up, and to me, it worked so well. And from the trailers, I feel like I'm capturing that same energy. It feels like just from the trailers of like, again, that to me is the spirit of Miss Marvel, is that she was inspired by other heroes, and that she felt like she could become one as well. Obviously, she was given her powers. But I'll be really interested to see if they choose to tweak that a little bit, since it doesn't seem like they're going to do the Inhuman line.
Yeah.
And if so, is there, a very important reason that she gets her powers that adds to her character even more than what the comics are?
Well, I mean, I think this is solely going off of trailers, and I know some reviews have come out today. Obviously, the embargo lifted, and obviously a lot of them have been positive, just looking at headlines and whatnot. But I haven't looked at any, so this is obviously just speculation. But it definitely feels like the bangles that she has, or the bracelets, whatever you want to call them, definitely feel like ancestral, and a more connection to her family than obviously we'll talk about it in the comics. It does sort of allude that her family does have an Inhuman lineage, with her and her brother, so if you pull that away and like find some other connection, I know some people have speculated maybe it's somehow tied to the Eternals, if like that they're imbuing something, with because they've been around, and obviously, but I do know Kevin Feige and Sana and Bisha K. Ali, who's the head writer, they've all said that they've changed the powers and how she gets them to more closely connect it to who Carol and Monica are in the MCU, because obviously she's going to appear in the movie The Marvels next after this. So they wanted her to be connected to them as well, because Carol, obviously the connection with Carol from the comics, but also the history that Monica has with taking the name Captain Marvel in the comics and such, like the three of them are all very closely connected, so making that a more cohesive something in the MCU I think is a good move. And so, yeah, looking forward to seeing how that plays out. And I'm sure, and I mean, as I said, the reviews have all been glowing. So obviously, whatever, and I'm assuming in this first episode, we're going to get some or all of her getting the power. So obviously, it's like I said, I haven't read anything, but it sounds like people who have seen it have enjoyed whatever the explanation they've given.
Yeah. That's good to know. That's awesome. And I do see we got a couple people joining us in the chat. What's up, Allison and Justin? And Allison asked, is Miss Marvel on Disney Plus now? It comes out tonight. So
in quotes tonight.
Yes, in quotes tonight. We are not confirmed on when. We can only assume it's not as late as normal because they're advertising it as tonight. But and my question would be, and maybe I'll do this. I'm gonna open up a Disney Plus tab, and we can keep monitoring it, because I keep thinking, if this is made for younger audiences, why would they release it at midnight?
That's true.
You know what I mean? True. Like, why wouldn't they release it at maybe like 8 o'clock at night? So we'll see. And this could be an instance of, we have to cancel the show and shut it off. I'm not seeing anything yet, so we're good. And actually, I don't think we'd shut it off. We'd live stream.
Yeah,
we're just going to press play and live stream it. But so super excited about that. If not tonight, 100% it'll be there tomorrow. And what Allison's talking about it being a secret release. Maybe because the last episode of Obi-Wan, they released it the night before as well. And I think that's probably what you're referring to, that secret release. So I don't know. Allison, we were talking before you joined that this is probably a lot of data-driven analytics that Marvel, I guess, and also Disney are probably looking at to see if we release this show now and release Obi-Wan later, is that going to save us bandwidth to not crash the app, or should we do them at the same time and see how many people watch it at the same time? So it'll be very interesting. Tune in, obviously, to Nerd Life Network, where I'm sure Brian and the Weirdos are going to be talking about those episodes each and every week. So I'm going to pull this up. I took a ton of This is a comics and cinema first, guys. As you know, I have screenshots of everything as I'm reading, of all the really important pieces. And I was like, I don't like doing this because, I have to hold up an iPad to the screen, and you're listening as a podcast. You don't even know what I'm talking about. Tune in on the YouTube because it's just as fun over here. But I was able to log in on StreamYard on my iPad, and I uploaded all those screenshots in so I can put them on. So the first one I wanted to put on here, I seriously, my mind was blown because I was going to email them to myself, and it was like 300 megs, and I was no way. But it took like 5 minutes. They're all on here. So this is a design variant cover by Jamie McKelvey, who also coincidentally designed the Captain Marvel costume as well. But as you can see here, they have this piece right here, the secret compartment. You can't see my mouse, but the secret compartment on this bracelet, right? And also super cool. I loved that little bit down there. It says hint of original costume with Captain Marvel design on her scarf at the very bottom. It's like the half of the star. So cool. We do not see very much, if any, conversation during these 19 issues around that bracelet.
Does she even have? I don't think she even has it.
I think she wears it in some scenes, and we'll see, because I have other shots in here of her as Miss Marvel, so we'll be able to know for sure. But I just found it so curious that, again, the show's using this, right? But it didn't get mentioned in the comics yet. In the design, they're saying it's important, right? They're highlighting it and saying, oh, there's a secret compartment in here. So maybe they originally intended for the bracelet to mean more than it did. And again, I think I know they said that it's like a family heirloom from the second series. But they don't dive into it as much as we would have assumed based on that.
Yeah, I wonder if going to the distinguished competition, if they were doing something with it being like kind of like the Flash ring of how the costumes in the ring, like if it's got a secret compartment, like maybe like something forms out of it for her costume. But I mean, being on a bracelet, and it looks like it's either on top or either underneath the bracelet. But she also isn't the type of hero who has any sort of weaponry, like at least in the comics, her abilities, her embiggening abilities, is she can adjust her size and matter into, and more or less she's like a Mr. Fantastic, for anybody listening out there who maybe doesn't know what that means or whatever. If you're familiar with Mr. Fantastic and his stretchy powers, that's more or less a like-minded comparison to Miss Marvel, so in that vein, she doesn't have any sort of like power beams or any sort of energy blasts or anything like that. Obviously in the show, they're changing it to be more of a Green Lantern-esque powers. At least it looks like, where she can make some sort of energy construct type things. So, but in the comics, like you're saying, Alex, like we never really see her use that. So it's interesting to see either what Jamie McKelvey was thinking in that, or whatever the creators in telling Jamie draw this, like what their plans were potentially for this, if it's not really been utilized,
Yeah. And I will say too, if you go on IMDb, there is a one sentence, not synopsis, but kind of what the show is about. And it says, New Jersey raised Kamala Khan learns she has polymorphous powers. That's all it says, which again, polymorphous being the same thing almost as Mr. Fantastic. Her powers honestly are a little cooler than Mr. Fantastic, or at least more fully realized, because his character can stretch super, super far. He can stretch his head, he can stretch his arms, his legs. But that's about all he ever does. And he's usually, his bigger power is his brain. But with Kamala, she can do that same thing, but she can also make herself really big. She can make herself really small. She can change her appearance. She can heal. And again, a lot of those things are almost inferred with Mr. Fantastic, of like, he's said in moments of like, oh yeah, I can get hit by a bullet and I don't die because I'm made of rubber basically. But with her, they were active in saying like, here's what she can do. Here's what she can do. And so I'm curious too. I guess my bet would be, if we're trying to keep the Miss Marvel, Monica, and Captain Marvel storyline together, that bracelet is probably Kree origin.
Yeah,
because
most
then that
definitely.
ties her straight there. You also are staying faithful to the comics because since the Inhumans are Kree, so or they were Kree experiments, so there would be some piece of it there. But the other thing I was thinking of is the only other thing tied is the Infinity Stones, right? So will they dip back into that to say, oh, this is how she gets her powers too? Like, oh, you guys all got power from the Infinity Stones? That's so crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll see. So in this story, in the first few issues, and I loved this too about it. I think it's even the first issue. We kind of get her origin story. It isn't drawn out over the whole 6 issues, and I think the great part of that is because they know her story is more than her origin. And so it's like, let's just get through the origin and show what we really want to, which is how does she deal with having these powers. But her origin kind of comes from she has a couple of friends that she hangs out with. She has a best friend named Nakia, who I guess they're best friends. They've grown up together. Maybe it's high school, right? You know, we're growing apart. We're not growing apart. But then she's also best friends with Bruno, who is Italian American. Big fan because I'm also Italian American. But he runs. I think his brother doesn't work there, but he works at the Circle Q.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably the same as the Circle K. They've actually made a lot of references in here of like what they call it. U-Space instead of MySpace or something.
Yeah.
Like they switched a lot of the names. I thought that
Yeah.
was pretty funny. But yeah, so they're like the little band of friends. There's another girl in the sort of group. She ends up becoming part of the group in the second series, but her name is Zoe. She's a jerk. She's one of the mean girls at the school, basically, and she's the worst kind of mean girl because she's super nice, but she's mean through her niceness, which you always just, like, I hate that. And they did such a good job of showing that here. She's also the one that kind of teases Kamala the most in regards to her religion, in regards to her family. So she's kind of the
her food
pressure.
and everything, like
Yep.
what she was
That,
eating
she
and
shows
everything.
up at that party and says that she smells like curry. And it was like, man, and that's how it happens a lot like that in the real world. But I was like, I appreciated Marvel being so kind of honest about that sort of stuff. But so essentially what happens is her and I think it's her boyfriend at the time are having a party, and she is not allowed to come because her parents won't let her come. And she decides to sneak out. And so she sneaks out. She has a small sip of a drink, which I thought was hilarious. Reminded me a lot of me. And Bruno, God love him, is like, Kamala, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be out. Like he's basically like her third parent, and I loved that. Even though he clearly loves her, and you kind of can tell that from basically the first scene, which is great. But so he's like, let me make sure you get home okay, go back home. And so she goes home, but at that point in time, the Terrigen bomb had gone off in that would come from the was Infinity, the Infinity story. And so everyone who has an Inhuman gene is getting turned into Inhumans. And so the Inhuman process, you inhale those fumes, and you're going to a cocoon basically. And so once you emerge from that cocoon, you're forever changed. And so some people turn into a big pile of rocks, some people turn into dust, some people don't change at all. And so she comes out of it, and loved this bit. I took a screenshot of that. This is what happens after she comes out of it. And so we get a very cool, I'm assuming this is kind of from the Quran or some sort of, I know there's some Muslim iconography in here, which I thought was awesome with Captain Marvel there. I love the way she's kind of got her hands out, and you've got Iron Man doing this sort of like, it's all of those old gods. Like, I just thought that was crazy cool. But so she sees them all, and she's like, oh my gosh. And they kind of have a come to Jesus moment with her in her head of like, and I loved it. There's a bit that Captain Marvel says to her and says, like, your life is about to change, but it's not the way you think. And so that's kind of the carrying through of this arc, is that she gets the powers. And this whole time, right, she's wanting to be someone else. She wants to be the normal girl. She wants to be someone that's popular. And so it's funny too, when she comes out of that cocoon, I found it interesting that she changes into Captain Marvel, but the Miss Marvel. So she's got the Miss Marvel costume. She's white, blonde. And so no one really knows who she is. So technically that was her first costume. What did you think about all that?
Yeah, I thought that was because I wasn't aware going in about her powers having more of like the morphing abilities and whatnot, So that took me a little bit by surprise of seeing like, oh, she like I didn't know, was that in her head or like what? But then like yeah, we find out that she's morphed into um, the um, the version of Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel, and so like, and then she's like going around, and as we're continuing with the story, like she's starting to figure out that she has powers, and like but she, like you said when we mentioned that she had one sip of beer, she thinks she's like drunk off of this like
Right.
one sip of beer that she had, and then she starts figuring out her powers, and then eventually she gets back to um the party, and Zoe and her boyfriend are having an argument, and Zoe falls into the lake, and that's when she like realizes she's like oh god, like a hero needs to come around, and then she's like wait, I look like a hero, maybe I am a hero, and then some of her powers manifest, and and begins, or I think as we're leading up to that, like her powers going on the fritz, right? Like
Right. She like
she's like she's
shrinks.
shrinking, she's getting bigger, like not bigger or whatever, and so like she ends up getting a giant hand and like scooping up like the lake muck or whatever with
Yeah, I love
Zoe
that. I hated it,
Zoe
but
in
I
the
loved it.
palm, and yeah, and so everybody thinks Ms. Marvel is back because or Carol Danvers is back as Miss Marvel. They're like, oh, is she going retro? Is like she coming back with the old costume or whatever? And so like it takes all of her Kamala's willpower to like change back to herself, and then like, but yeah, that's like a great introduction of her. That like I feel that that with that panel you show of the three of them, that like she just somehow internalized her love of Carol Danvers and wanting to be a hero like her, that it just, when the powers and not knowing how to control it, it just manifested as her, as this Miss Marvel version of her.
Yep, absolutely. And it's funny too, you see it in this photo on the bird, and she wears it a lot of times, and I think it's kind of a defense mechanism as a teenager. I loved her snow hat that she has, the like big kind of babushka hat that she wears. And I saw it in one of the trailers. I was like, no way. So they're going to use that, which I thought was great. So this was one of those shots as you were kind of going of her in that costume, but I put this one on, or I saved it because she says something up there on the top. You probably can't read it, but it says, maybe putting on a costume doesn't make you brave. Maybe it's something else. And I really liked that she's kind of, even in this moment, yeah, she's a teenager. Yeah, she's making mistakes, but she understands what it means to be a hero, partially because she's kind of idolized these heroes for a long time. So she knows what it means to be a hero, but she's starting to get the finer details now and saying like, maybe it's a little more than this or a little more than that. I thought that's great. And I don't think it happens the same night, but now she starts going out and trying to fight crime. And this is in this first arc, we get introduced to this very creepy villain who I'm okay if we don't see. I don't think we will because I don't see anyone in the casting that looks like this. But the inventor, who is apparently a clone of Thomas Edison that accidentally got spliced with a cockatiel. And so we find out there's like another guy who's kind of the mastermind behind
Mm-hmm.
creating this person. But his whole thing, which I found completely fascinating, was he has been manipulating teenagers into acting as living batteries for like constructs, to take over the world sort of thing. But he's talking about it as if, and it's part of the theme of this arc, almost for the first probably 10 issues of society doesn't care about this generation. Society doesn't care about, at that time would have probably been, I guess, the very tail end of millennials, but
Mm-hmm.
now Gen Z in that same sense of like, they're not offering anything, all of this stuff. She has to read like articles at school, which I thought was pretty cool. Learning about that. And so he's basically saying, well, society doesn't care about you. They've already casted you aside. How about I give you purpose by doing this? And they're totally brainwashed into it. They're like, yeah, I would love that. I totally agree with you. And I love too, when she's got that moment where she's telling some of them, she's like, do you not see how this guy's a bad
Yeah.
guy? Like he just left you. And they're like, yeah, you're right. And so she ends up getting them all on her side. So another great kind of, this is how one of her superpowers is she's just a very genuine and honest person. And she's not afraid to kind of show her emotions, which I know we're going to get to that when we start talking about Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
Of she really kind of makes an impact on him. But in between that, she shows up back at home, and there's this great conversation that she has. And as I was reading it, I remembered that someone knew that she was Miss Marvel, and I couldn't remember if it was her dad or her mom. And we ended up technically we don't find out until the very end of the series. But I loved this one because again, you've got a scene that you would have never ever seen in the Spider-Man comics, and you don't see in those intro Spider-Man comics around her father talking with her and having an actual conversation. So he says, "Are you going to tell me why you're dressed like that?" And she says, "Do I have to?" And he says, "I'm asking you to." And she said, "I had to go out tonight to help a friend who was in trouble." He says, "Wearing a disguise?" He says, "Can you understand why that would make your Abu nervous?" And she says, "Yeah, but I'm fine. This looks way weirder than it is, I promise." And he says, "I want to believe you, Janu, but I am terrified by this new Kamala. I know the kinds of pressures on young girls these days, pressure to be things they're not, do things they don't want to do. I don't want that for you, Beta. Not for my only daughter." And then I copied the next one too because this was crazy awesome. He says, "Do you know why we named you Kamala?" And she says, "No, it's a weird name. Everyone gets to be named Yasmin and Layla and stuff." He says it's a special name. Kamal means perfection in Arabic. Your mother had a very difficult time when she was pregnant with Amir, which is her brother, her older brother. After he was born, the doctor told us we couldn't have any more children, and we were devastated. Then 5 years later, you came along, our little miracle. I held you in my hands, a tiny, screaming, pinkish brown baby, and thought you were the most perfect thing that I had ever seen, and that is why we gave you that name. You don't have to be someone else to impress anybody. You are perfect just the way that you are. And he says, "We're not trying to make your life miserable, Kamala. We just want you to be safe." And I love that. That, again, is just such a strong theme from the story because that's kind of the turning point where she stops disguising herself as the blonde, white Miss Marvel and just stays as herself. And she's like, you know what? I don't need to pretend. Obviously, she's still wearing a mask, but she doesn't need to pretend to be anyone else. And that's just is so powerful because again, Uncle Ben never got to give a conversation like that to Peter, or he would have never had to give a conversation like that to Peter. And so it's just cool to see a different perspective like that, and to see a parent being like, "I get it, you're doing stuff. I don't need to know what it is right now, but can you please just be safe?" Like, that's good parenting, especially because in half the other issues, they're really mean to her and they're really hard on her.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you have something you were going to say?
Nope.
Oh, okay, cool. The other part of this too is there's another character who I grew to like, which was Sheikh Abdullah, who kind of runs the mosque nearby. And so the interesting piece of this too is that her brother Amir he's not necessarily like a fanatic or anything. He's just very, very passionate about the religion. So he's at the mosque all the time. He's praying, he's going to the studies and learning how to do all these sort of things. So you see him in random issues where he's just like, "I don't want to be bothered. I'm just trying to study." And that actually ends up adding some consternation to her father too, because he kind of thinks he's a bum because he's like, you can't just have religion and let everyone pay for all your stuff. But Sheikh Abdullah gives another really great conversation to her too. And this is just, again, the power of having a community on your side. And I think back to, Wanda, right? From the movies of her having nobody. But then you think about like Peter Parker as well. He also had nobody. He had Uncle Ben that never knew. Aunt May doesn't find out till a really long time. He has no one to talk with. He won't talk to anyone because he's so neurotic. Yet she has this community of people who are reaching out to her. And so, her parents are like, "Hey, we're a little concerned. We want you to go talk with the Sheik." And so she, and so that was this shot here. Again, the art's great. This is a different artist than Alfona, but same thing. He says, this is like her superhero conversation. She says, "I don't mean to disobey my parents. It's just that sometimes I have to in order to do the right thing." And he says, "I see. Well, if you're not very good at it, helping people, that is, perhaps you need a teacher." And she says, "A teacher? Wait, you're not going to tell me to be a good girl and focus on my studies." He says, "If I told you that, you'd ignore me. I know how headstrong you are. So instead, I will tell you that do what you're doing with as much honor and skill as you can." And she says, "I can't believe it. I thought you were going to warn me about Satan and boys." And he says, "I've been giving youth lectures at this mosque for 10 years. If I still have to warn you about Satan and boys, I should lose my job." he says, I'm asking you for something more difficult. If you insist on pursuing this thing that you will not tell me about, do it with the qualities befitting an upright young woman: courage, strength, honesty, compassion, and self-respect. Do we have a deal? And she says, yeah, I mean, yes, thank you. And then she says, what about finding a teacher? And he says, well, you know how the saying goes: when the student is ready, and then the teacher shall appear. And that teacher ends up being Wolverine,
Mm-hmm.
which I completely forgot about. So that was a really nice surprise. I was like, holy cow. And he's during this phase in the comics where his healing factor is on the fritz, and so he doesn't have a healing factor. This is actually right before he dies in the
Mm-hmm.
comics. And so, he has a whole conversation with her about that. But I love this bit because they're chasing after the inventor. They get to fight giant alligators. Shout out to Ryan there.
Yep.
We got to see them again. What'd you think of the whole? We'll start with the Sheik Abdullah piece. Anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I just thought it was a good another mentor person for her giving advice, and again, not maybe not understanding what she's going through, and maybe not really thrilled that she's not being truthful or whatever, but like still giving advice of being like, well, if you can't tell us about this or like explain, like at least do it with these values and everything, and like still trying to make a positive out of whatever's happening that she doesn't feel comfortable about sharing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And here's a cool shot I got. This was probably my favorite interaction with them because this just reminded me of, like, I guess maybe memes and whatnot. But this one where he goes to attack her and she's like, wait, no, like, I'm not a bad guy. And so he just goes and flips over her instead. And she says, wow, such athletic, very claws, so amazed. I love that. She fangirls so hard
Yeah.
over Wolverine, and it's great because he's almost written with a little bit of a soft side. And I wonder if that's probably because he knows he's dying, but he has some great conversations with her, trying to tell her, how to approach certain situations and how to fight certain stuff. Again, was not expecting it to be Wolverine. I was like, this is when Captain Marvel shows up, right? And so I wonder if they'll change that in the show. Obviously, yes, right. We're not going to see Wolverine in the show,
Right.
but do we see someone else that isn't Captain Marvel that comes into this? That's another hero.
I think we might. Yeah, I think we'll get either somebody we know or at least somebody else that's a larger figure in this series that'll be an additional mentor type person, because obviously Bruno, who's her friend, kind of becomes her like guy in the chair, kind of like Ned is for in the MCU for
Yep.
Peter. But he also like has the crush on her, so like, but he also doesn't know any of this either, so like she needs somebody to help guide her through this, and while I do expect Carol to show up at some point, I think like in like this series it'll be towards the end of it, but yeah, I think we're gonna get somebody as a mentor-esque person for her as a hero to try and like help her through some of this. Who it could be, I can't really put a name to it, but I feel like it's going to be someone we obviously know, but it wouldn't be like a Captain America type person,
right? Like like a B level.
Yeah, like not a good example, but it would be like a Darcy type person, or like a Jimmy Woo. Like it would be. I think it would be somebody on that level,
That would work out because if you remember and recall, this has been much documented, but I guessed back when WandaVision came out that the Hex was what gave Kamala her powers, if you remember that. Because she's so close to Westview, right? She's in Jersey City. So it would make sense if, again, we don't know when the show takes place, but maybe it's around that same time and, he's in the area and he shows up.
Yep.
That would be really cool because I think he does, despite only seeing him a couple of times, I feel like he's got a lot of wisdom to give, especially in dealing with superheroes, which is kind of what she would be looking for. And it would totally make sense too that like her mentor is someone that she doesn't idolize or that she has no idea about, because she'd be like, come on, why couldn't it have been Carol or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been funny. Speaking of other influential characters, let's jump into another person in the cast. So also confirmed in the show, his name is Cameron. And he is, you see at the top, she was like, and my parents think that I'm going to be soulmates. And she sees him for the first time and he's handsome. He plays World of Battlecraft just like she does. They're both gamers, and I was like, no way. So this is how her and Red Dagger meet. But this is not Red Dagger. This is, and I was like, oh, so what's the story? Well, the story with him is that he is the son of family friends. So they're not related, but he is also inhuman. So he has kind of like electrical powers. He honestly, his powers are like Gambit's powers, and he doesn't mention it, but he says he can charge things up with kinetic energy and make them explode. And so they kind of tag team for a little bit. They have a little fling. It's the classic high school story, right? Bruno gets jealous, but at the end of the day, we find out that he's actually a bad guy, and so he is working with another Inhuman, and they are a part of a sect of Inhumans who want to overthrow Medusa, Black Bolt, and all them. Although Black Bolt's missing during this time, so Medusa's the one running the show. Again, all of that's in the comics, and it was interesting enough. But even, reading it back from where I am now in life, I don't know. I was just like, okay, it seemed a little extra. I get it. Oh, of all the Inhumans that turned into Inhumans, we want them all to come live with us on Adelan. But Miss Marvel's a teenager, and she's very adamant that she's doing things on her own, so we're going to respect that. And it was like, okay, Queen Medusa, who can order anyone to do anything, like Wolverine called you and said, "Hey, I just met this teenager who you need to go check out." And so, what does she do? She sends Lockjaw to hang out with her. Now, if we see that in the show, I'm going to be happy about that.
That's a better companion. Anyways.
Yeah, that's a much better companion. He was awesome in this. We get some great teleporting, all that. But again, it felt like the Inhumans were shoehorned into this, and no disparaging towards them. I love the Inhumans, but this was during that time when Marvel was really trying to turn them into the mutants of the world, which was a cool idea, but it just, I don't know, it felt really rushed. And so with her getting her powers that way, I was cool with it. But like, oh, you're part of this legacy now. We are your family. And it was like, it worked only in the sense of her having to choose, but she never even does, right? She only ever chooses to just go do her own thing. Like, she's never really wants to be a part of them, which is fine. And so Cameron is trying to overthrow that because, again, they want freedom. They want to be able to do whatever they want, all the classic villain stuff. And so by the end of it, she has to go apologize to Bruno. Or he thinks like, oh, I can't believe you're into him. And she's like, no, I made the biggest mistake. I didn't do it. And so then he's like, wait, so you're not together? And then, the bells start ringing again, and it's always that way. But what did you think of Cameron?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Obviously, yeah, it felt like the perfect cliche of like, like the really pretty guy comes in and like then the girl starts like fawning over him and whatever, and then obviously he turns out to be not not great for her, or like not who she expected and whatnot, So I'm definitely curious. At least from what I gathered from the couple trailers, it seemed like he was maybe more of just like the hot guy in school, maybe not necessarily the family friend, as he is in the comics, but he still could be, and they just go to the same school or something like that. But he definitely seems like the guy that like all the girls in the grade like are crushing on or whatever. But it'll be interesting if he'll be any sort of foil to Kamala. And obviously he likely probably won't have powers still, but even if he does, then like how does he have powers, and like what are they or whatever, in the show or whatever. But
or he's he might be for general audiences, he might just be the same way I felt when I was reading it for the first time, of like, oh, he's the romantic interest for her to put the wedge between her and Bruno. But then it turns out he's an actual jerk. So maybe he doesn't even need powers. It's just like, oh, he was just pretending to be nice because, he was around my parents or whatever that is. And then she learns a life lesson.
Yeah, I could totally see that. So it's very possible.
Yep, yeah. And so that's all the main characters, I guess. There's going to be so many other people in it that pop up, but the only other one I would say, again, is her brother, and we're going to talk about that here in a sec, which is this last arc. So again, this was leading into Secret Wars, and as we talked about on some of these prior issue or episodes, these incursions were going on. And so what happens right before Secret Wars is there's only one incursion left, which is the Ultimate Universe where Miles Morales is from, and the Marvel 616 universe. And so the last arc opens up with the Earths colliding. And so this was probably one of my favorite times to be a comic book fan, because Marvel canceled every single one of their lines. and then had the last arc of all of those runs be about this. They were all called Last Days, and then they all ended. And so it was really powerful to see. I remember thinking, like, man, they are brave for doing that, of just shutting down all of their lines. We don't know what's coming up. Then they had like Battle World type comics that were coming. And so what I loved about this one was that, she says, and this is what's funny too, is that breakup, it wasn't even really a breakup, right? But like that really affected her. And so leads her into this. She says, when I said when I said a broken heart feels like the end of the world, this isn't quite what I was talking about. And now she has to deal with this. But in doing so, because it's such a world-ending event, she gets to get a visit from none other than Carol Danvers, who shows up, says, nice uniform. Still not sure how I feel about the name. And this is when Carol was wearing her absolute badass not Illuminati, but like Hickman costume during the Time Runs Out storyline. This is actually the costume that Maria was wearing in 838 in Doctor Strange, which was like, again, it's just a darker costume. There's a couple covers with it as well, but she patrols the city, and so it's a very, honestly, not counting the intro arc, this is probably my favorite arc of Miss Marvel, just because it captured that sense of futility, that sense of impending doom so well, that her and Carol are just going around the city seeing, like, is there anything we can do right now? Because the world is literally ending. And at the same time, Carol is struggling with, how do I convey this to Kamala? Because I don't want to tell her that the world is ending, but at the same time, she needs to know that. And she also needs to not tell anybody that. So there's some really good scenes here. And I loved this one. That was just one of those splash pages of, again, she's living her dream, right? She's getting to run around with Carol. We also get to see her brother get powers, though only temporary. But this was because of Cameron, who you see up on the top left there, who, kind of looks like someone from like Hercules or something like that. I'm trying to think of, or maybe Kubo. But yeah, so her brother kind of looks like armor, and he's just got this armor, I guess, that he can use. Again, it fades away in like the same issue, but I thought that was pretty cool. And him too, he was like, I don't want powers. I'm very happy with who I am. And maybe he doesn't say it here. That's an important one. We're going to talk about that in a second. But yeah, I loved that. She kind of talks with him, and he was like, no, he says, I don't understand why people assume because I'm obsessed with my religion, because I care about it, I'm passionate, I dress meekly, I do my prayers. I don't get why people assume that means I'm not happy. He was like, I am completely happy. And I thought that was a really cool message, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, especially in with Islam as well, of just these people who are incredibly dedicated to their religion. And that's amazing. As long as you don't get into that radicalization where you're causing others harm, love whatever you want to love, and worship whoever you want to worship. That's totally fine. So I thought that was cool. But this is what I wanted to bring up, Kevin. So Carol gives Kamala a symbol, it's like a necklace, I guess. He says, I don't do mushy very well, but I wanted you to have something that you could hold to remind you that you don't have to do this all alone. And she says, it's your star and my lightning bolt. And she says, yeah, it's also a GPS locator, so don't lose it. Do we think that's going to come up in the show? I mean, you've already got the breadcrumb has been dropped of the Marvels logo, right?
Right.
Their stuff. So the precedent has been set here, but is she going to show up and give a very, similar to Nick Fury pager to her that she says, if you need anything, give me a buzz?
Yeah, I think we'll, like you said, I did like this arc of seeing her interact with Carol in this, and obviously, as far as we are aware, in the MCU, Carol was never known as Miss Marvel. Like, she just went from being her Air Force pilot to being captain. Yep. Well, she was a captain in the Air Force, and then she just took the name Captain Marvel, So she was never Miss Marvel. So that part of the lineage, as far as we're aware, is not there. Because, like, obviously when she shows up in the comic, she's like, I'm not sure about the name, because Kamala is repurposing it. So I'm curious of how, like, obviously she's called Miss Marvel because she likes Captain Marvel, so that's part of, at least in the MCU. So it'll be interesting, like, how she shows up and like the conversation that she has. Like, I'm sure Kamala's gonna freak out as well and be like, either you might apologize, or like it could be in a moment where I wonder if it'll be a moment in the series like in Homecoming when Peter's like under the rubble and like he's like he does it all by himself, but like I want it'll be at Kamala's like lowest, and then like the end stinger is we see or hear Captain Marvel, and like she comes to assist Kamala, and like maybe and then maybe it's just them talking, and like they're sitting on the lamppost and they're just talking about like what it means to be a hero and like saving people or like whatever the circumstances of the show are going to be about. And then yeah, maybe she'll leave either after Kamala's done something, she'll come back and be like, "Hey kid, like good job" or something, and like give her like some sort of token or something. So then that way, when Carol's in the Marvels, she like pushes her beeper or something, and or Reed comes to claim it from her to get her.
Or it's like something where when she gets close by, the thing like lights up.
And something maybe God, something or something like that. Yeah, but I definitely think there's obviously going to be some interaction in this series, and then we'll figure out what she either bestows upon her or like leaves with her, and then how that propels us into the movie.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think there's going to be any jokes about Mrs. Marvel? Like, oh, what do we call you, Mrs. Marvel instead of Miss Marvel?
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay, we'll see. Maybe I don't know. That's gonna be my my receipt, and I probably won't get any points for it. So the last part of this arc, again, as the world is literally crumbling and reality is about to end, that was crazy too. Again, so existential in it, where she's explaining to her. She says something. There's like multiple points where I got so sad reading it. Because there's multiple points where she's like, we should team up again sometime. And then Carol says, like, do you not remember what we were just talking about? Like, there isn't going to be a next time. Mm-hmm. And she gets to the spot where she is in the place and in the school, which is where, and we were talking about this before the show, but I guess the school has been kind of warded by Loki, which was from the 12th issue, a kind of throwaway issue, Valentine's Day sort of thing. There's a dance, Loki has some shenanigans, but at the end of this, her parents show up, her family shows up, and she tells her mom that she's Miss Marvel, and her mom says, I know. And this broke me. It broke me the first time I read it, broke me the second time I read it. I love this of like a parent knowing the fact that she doesn't have to stress about it. I mean, you can see it in her eyes, how surprised she is by it. And she gets to the spot where her mom says, I'm not mad. And she says, wait, what? She says, I said, I'm not mad. You are at a difficult age. Your father and I were worried you would get involved with drugs or with friends who were bad for you. If the worst thing you do is sneak out to help suffering people, then I thank God for having raised a righteous child. I got goosebumps just saying that. Like, how cool is that? And so she, gives her another hug and says, I'm proud of you, Beta. And she says, thanks, Ami. And sometimes you have to face the end of the world to find the beginning of something better. Like, drop the mic. So good. What'd you think of that scene?
Yeah, I thought that was great to especially to reveal, like one parent knew, because at least with Spider-Man, it's always like, does Aunt May know? Does she not know? Like what does she figure out? But like just right here, like coming out, like at least one parent. I don't know if in any of the later runs, if her dad ever finds out or her brother or anything.
I think
like
he
that,
eventually does
or something. Yeah, but like having her mom, just like I feel like that's a mother-daughter relationship is like having that she can confide in her mom, at least, and if that's in the series, if that's something that either happens in like by the second episode or the third episode, so that it's like at least Kamala can like have somebody else to turn to like in the situations, or at least if she's like has the traits of like sneaking out or whatever, and her dad is like being like, Kamala, like what are you doing? Like you should be staying inside or whatever. And then like she can like look at her mom, and like the mom can be like, oh, it's okay, like like this time or whatever, and like give that look of like, I know, like we've talked and like I know what you're doing and everything, and like but like don't do it again, but like be careful, right. But like I know why you're doing it or whatever, so I think that'll be good. But like at least I think from a little bit that we've seen in the trailers that obviously they have like there's the one of like she's in her room and she uses her hand to like close the door because like the parents are like, what's going on in there, and like whatever. So they're definitely curious, like the beginning issues of like not sure of like what's going on with her or whatever. But I think there's also a clip that they been in something of like her dad and her are like on the roof or something talking. So maybe the dad's going to be the one that learns or something. Who knows? But I think that'll be having the family aspect of this is really intriguing.
Do you think that she is going to get her powers in the first episode?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That'll be cool. Do you know how long the episodes are?
I don't. They're probably going to be about 40, like whatever Moon Knight was like.
I thought they were like 20.
No, they're like 40. The rule of thumb has been like if it's like the 6 episodes of a series, they're around the 40-ish minutes, and if they're more than 6, with the like what She-Hulk will be or what WandaVision, they're around like the 20 to 30
until the end, though.
Until the end, yeah. But so yeah, I think they're going to be around like 40. I haven't seen anybody doing the clickbaits of this is how long Miss Marvel is, and fans are freaking out or whatever. I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any of those yet, but I'm gonna imagine it's got to be about probably gonna be 38, 40, maybe 45 minutes. Who knows?
So that makes sense. Then that's
somewhere around there. But yeah, I think we'll see her powers by the middle to second half of it, of whatever it is, and then have her in her cosplay Carol Danvers outfit that we've seen in the trailer, which I think we'll see her in that by the end of the first episode, and see where that takes us.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Okay, so last thing that I screenshotted was the second to last page of this story before the next page. Everything kind of goes white because the world ends. But what I loved about this, and I hope beyond hope that we get this, because we've been getting so many great stories of female empowerment, and also of just this idea that you do not have to be in a relationship with somebody to love them. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be this traditional sense. And this embodied it, I think, to perfection, because she says, and this whole point in time, right? Bruno keeps trying to say like, I love you. And he does. And she keeps avoiding the question. And so she comes back and she says, being Miss Marvel, it's filled up my heart and my life in a way that nothing else ever has. I'm not ready to be anything else to anyone else. I need to give this everything I've got. And I just love that sort of headstrong mentality of like, hey, I care about you a lot, but I got to focus on this right now. And he's a great guy too, because he says, hey, you're amazing. You've taken on a huge responsibility and saved my butt a couple of times. And you're just the best version of Kamala. And so, at the end, as it all goes away, he says, you say that like there's still hope, like we're going to make it through this somehow. And she says, yeah, I think there is still hope. And again, kind of ending on that line, even though, as we all know in comics, right, it all came back. But this is the only time in comics I ever actually thought everything was going to end, because they did such a good job of making sure of that by canceling these lines. And oh my gosh. And so to see her again in the second run was fantastic. They pick up where they leave off. There's some great storylines in the second one too. Bruno goes to Wakanda, and on like a study abroad sort of thing. And so he's like the dumbest person there, even though he's so smart, like he's super smart, which was great. But yeah, so overall, like I said, love this story. I think we got a good grasp on maybe where some things are going to translate over into the show and maybe where they're not. Any final thoughts, Kevin, or any final things you want to mention?
No, I think we hit most of them. Yeah, like we said, or we were speaking beforehand, I definitely think most of the influence from the series will be this initial run. Obviously, we won't really have the Inhuman components or the incursions happening. There could be incursions now. Yeah, there could be. And maybe that's what propels us into the Marvels more so potentially. Like, never know for sure, but I'm not expecting any incursion stuff, but I think definitely the essence and the spirit of what this initial run was and did is what we're going to be getting in this in the Disney Plus series. And I can't wait. I kind of wanted. I think the press have seen the first 2 episodes, and I kind of wish we're getting 2 episodes tonight, just to because everybody, like I said, the initial reaction sounds like it's very positive and a really great addition to the MCU, and like I'm almost wishing it's like we had two so that we could enjoy it. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this first episode, which it hasn't dropped yet. I was checking there.
You did? You're doing the refresh?
I was doing the refresh. Yeah,
Okay.
well, because it hit 9 p.m. Eastern here on the East Coast, so I was like, oh, maybe now, but yeah, they have not dropped it as far as I can tell. But so
maybe at 8, maybe in an hour.
Yeah, maybe we'll see.
I hope so. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on tonight. It is always fun talking comics with you, and very excited to see this show.
Yeah, same. Thanks so much for having me, Alex. I'm glad we could
absolutely
talk.
And thanks to all of you out there for tuning in and listening. For Comics and Cinema, I'm your host, Alex Klein, and we will see you at the movies.